Meadowvale Court, a suburban enclave just outside Columbus, Ohio, had long enjoyed a reputation for peace and stability. Its rows of single-story ranch homes and two-story colonial houses, each sporting manicured lawns, hinted at a community that embraced order and neighborly cooperation. At the subdivision's entrance, a carefully landscaped sign read, "Meadowvale Court, where neighbors become family," a motto that many believed wholeheartedly. Overseeing the area's rules and appearances was the Meadowvale Homeowners Association, HOA. The HOA regulated lawn lengths, mailbox styles, and even the color palettes for exterior paint. Most residents followed the guidelines without complaint, recognizing that these little rules preserved the tidy charm that defined the neighborhood. But beneath the pleasant veneer, tensions sometimes flared. One reason for friction was a single individual who had wormed her way into the HOA's board, Barbara Millfield, though practically no one used that name. Instead, neighbors privately called her Karen. She was in her 50s, hair in a short bob, and she dressed in impeccably ironed shirts and slacks no matter the occasion. She had moved into Meadowvale Court 2 years prior, swiftly volunteering for community oversight roles and ultimately becoming the HOA's self-appointed enforcer. Officially, she held the title of Neighborhood Standards Liaison. Unofficially, she relished complaining about anything that didn't meet her personal vision of perfection. Yet, in truth, many neighbors had grown adept at tuning her out. She'd whine about trash bins placed an hour early on the curb or children's bicycles left in a driveway for too long, but these minor annoyances never erupted into major drama. Residents took her scolding with a nod and a half-smile. Over time, they half-expected her meddling, brushing it off as background noise. After all, Meadowvale Court remained relatively calm, with block parties in summer and the occasional yard sale. Nothing had pushed Karen to go beyond petty complaints. That changed when the local elementary school's parent-teacher organization, PTO, announced a charity bake sale to be held in front of Meadowvale's small community center. The aim was to raise money for children with physical disabilities, particularly those requiring specialized wheelchairs or therapy. Many families in the neighborhood jumped at the opportunity to help, signing up to bake cookies, cakes, and pies, setting up small stands, and advertising the event on social media. The sense of purpose and generosity felt electrifying. It was the biggest local fundraiser Meadowvale had seen in years. The only detail that gave some neighbors pause was the location. The plan was to line up about half a dozen folding tables along the sidewalk leading to the community center's entrance. Parents would stand behind their displays of baked goods and collect donations in boxes. Some worried that the setup might partially obstruct the walkway. But everyone assumed that if the event was well managed, leaving enough room for pedestrians, there'd be no issues. Unfortunately, they had forgotten about Karen. Or, more precisely, they had overlooked her capacity to escalate small concerns into major controversies. The idea of large folding tables interfering with the walkway pricked at Karen's sense of control, especially when the event spanned an entire weekend. She fixated on potential tripping hazards or visual clutter. Soon, the mild complaint turned into a full-blown crusade, culminating in a dramatic attempt to shut down the entire bake sale. The neighbors had no idea how intense and destructive Karen's protest would become, or how it would ironically spur them to create an even more inclusive, crowd-friendly setup that would make the fundraiser a resounding success. As the first hints of tension surfaced, most families were too busy baking cookies and crafting donation posters to notice the storm brewing behind Karen's fastidiously shuttered windows. 2 weeks before the scheduled bake sale, the HOA convened its monthly meeting in the Meadowvale Community Center's multipurpose room. Rows of folding chairs faced a makeshift stage where the board members, Karen among them, sat behind a long table. The usual crowd trickled in, older residents curious about property tax updates, younger couples checking if new playground equipment was in the budget. At first, the proceedings felt routine. Near the end of the session, Tricia Donovan, a warm-voiced mother of 3 who served as the PTO's head volunteer, stepped up to the microphone. She wore a broad smile. "Good evening, everyone. I'm here to share some exciting news. Meadowvale Elementary's PTO is hosting a charity bake sale in partnership with a local physical therapy association. All proceeds go to children requiring specialized wheelchairs and therapy sessions. We'd love the HOA's cooperation, mainly to use the sidewalk and front lawn of the community center next Saturday and Sunday. Karen immediately leaned forward, eyes narrowing. She fiddled with her pen, listening intently. Tricia continued, "We'll set up about 6 or 7 tables, each about 6 feet wide. Parents and kids will sell homemade goods. We expect decent foot traffic, neighbors, plus some folks from adjacent subdivisions. Our plan is to keep the walkway partially clear so no one is blocked from entering. It should be easy to pass by, or will a stroller if needed." Larry McPherson, the HOA president, smiled. "That sounds wonderful. This community is always happy to support local schools. Do you anticipate any issues with traffic or safety we need to address?" Tricia shook her head, her optimism shining. "We'll have volunteers watching for cars near the curb, ensuring kids don't run into the street. We'll post signs to keep the path partially open. If we need a permit from the HOA, we can file the paperwork promptly." Before Larry could respond, Karen cleared her throat loudly. She lifted her microphone and spoke with measured diction. "I have some serious concerns. Our community guidelines strictly limit obstructions on sidewalks. 6 or 7 tables would almost certainly hamper safe passage. What if people trip? Or if someone with a walker needs more space? And we must consider aesthetic standards. Large, cluttered displays are not exactly in line with Meadowvale's image." A hush fell. Tricia, taken aback, tried to reassure. "We'll arrange the tables carefully, leaving half the width of the walkway free. Plus, we have parents on hand to assist anyone who needs help passing." Karen pursed her lips. "I'm sorry, but from my vantage as neighborhood standards liaison, this is an unacceptable risk. We cannot allow a major hazard in front of the community center for 2 whole days. If we're not careful, we'll open ourselves up to liability. I recommend the board deny the request or relocate it to a less obstructive area, maybe in the parking lot, away from foot traffic." A murmur of discontent rippled through the audience. One father raised his hand, pointing out that the parking lot was less visible and not wheelchair-friendly, with uneven pavement. Another resident insisted that the sidewalk in front of the center was broad enough for both tables and pedestrians. Karen remained unmoved. She pressed the issue, urging an official vote to block the sidewalk usage entirely. Sensing the tension, Larry proposed a compromise. "How about we conditionally approve the event, provided the PTO can demonstrate a safe layout? We can keep an open corridor for pedestrians. Let's not shut this down prematurely, especially for a worthy cause." Applause followed. Karen scowled, but she recognized she was outnumbered. In the official minutes, the board decided to provisionally allow the sidewalk tables, on the condition that no hazard or major obstruction was created. They also scheduled a final inspection the day before the sale so Karen and other board members could verify compliance. Tricia, relieved, thanked everyone and reiterated how the funds would help disabled children. The meeting adjourned soon after, leaving Karen stewing. Over the next few days, that sense of dissatisfaction in Karen's mind hardened into resolve. If the board wanted her to inspect the arrangement, she'd do so with the strictest interpretation of the bylaws, potentially forcing the PTO to cancel or relocate at the last minute. She told herself it was about protecting the community's safety and image. In reality, it was about her craving to control how Meadowvale appeared to the outside world, along with her personal distaste for crowds and clutter. In the blink of an eye, a well-intentioned fundraiser had become a battleground for Karen's obsessive enforcement. Oblivious to the looming conflict, the PTO parents dove eagerly into plans for the bake sale. Every evening, text messages and social media posts buzzed with updates. Who was baking brownies? Who could bring cupcakes? Which kids would staff the donation table? The excitement grew as families envisioned the event's potential success, not just for charity, but also as a unifying force for the neighborhood. Tricia Donovan worked tirelessly on logistics. She sketched a layout of the front walkway, marking where each table might go. She measured the distance from the community center doors to the curb, ensuring at least half the width, 3 or 4 feet, remained clear for passersby. She designated a separate table for gluten-free and nut-free items, hoping to accommodate those with dietary restrictions. She even assigned a small kid zone near the lawn where younger children could hang posters or practice mini performances. In the meantime, parents posted flyers around the neighborhood. Meadowvale Charity Bake Sale, raising funds for kids' wheelchairs and therapy. Join us next weekend for sweet treats and sweet acts of kindness. A wave of goodwill swept across local social media groups. Even some older residents who rarely engaged in community events pledged to stop by and donate. The sense of generosity felt electric. Yet a few subtle warnings drifted back to Tricia and other PTO leaders. Quietly, neighbors whispered that Karen was not done. She was overheard muttering about strictly enforcing sidewalk codes. Others had observed her pacing around the community center with a tape measure in hand, scribbling notes. Some families, aware of her reputation, fretted that she might sabotage the event. Still, with the board's provisional approval, the PTO pressed on. They believed that if they adhered to the guidelines, no one could justifiably shut them down. Meanwhile, a local nonprofit wheelchair supplier expressed interest in visiting the bake sale. They planned to showcase a demo wheelchair and offer pamphlets on therapy resources. Tricia saw this as a golden opportunity to highlight how the fundraiser directly impacted the lives of disabled kids. "It's perfect," she beamed, imagining the synergy, a row of treat-laden tables, an educational booth, happy neighbors streaming in with donations. Nothing could overshadow that positivity, or so she hoped. Behind the scenes, Karen laid her plans. She rummaged through the HOA's thick binder of rules, focusing on any mention of obstructions in communal walkways, maximum permissible table dimensions, or events requiring special permits. She jotted down these bullet points, anticipating how she'd challenge the PTO's arrangement. If they didn't meet every tiny requirement, she would demand the immediate removal of tables or disclaim any liability on the HOA's part. She even proposed drafting an emergency motion to the board, urging them to consider the risks of last-minute compliance failures. In her mind, she wasn't the villain. She believed she was the only one preserving Meadowvale's dignity, ensuring that no cluttered carnival atmosphere tarnished the refined look of the community center. On the surface, she fulfilled her duty to inspect the setup. But in truth, she was itching to veto it entirely, especially once she learned the fundraiser might include extra props like a small wheelchair demonstration. "That's definitely going to block the walkway," she concluded. "I can't allow it." With the date fast approaching, the lines were drawn. The PTO parents, enthusiastic and well-intentioned, finalizing a delightful event for charity. And Karen, armed with regulations, ready to pounce on any perceived misstep. The question was, would the parents' earnest preparations be enough to withstand Karen's onslaught? Or would her strict enforcement unravel the entire plan, dealing a blow to the kids who needed it most? On the Friday morning before the bake sale, a small group gathered outside the community center for the final layout inspection. Present were Tricia Donovan, representing the PTO, Larry McPherson, the HOA president, a couple more board members, and of course Karen, looking stern in her neatly pressed slacks, clipboard in hand. Tricia had arrived early, chalking outlines on the sidewalk to indicate where each table would go. She demonstrated how the interior side of the walkway, closest to the building, would hold the 6 tables, while the exterior half would remain open for pedestrians. She also pointed out the proposed corner where the wheelchair demonstration booth would sit, partly on the grass. "We made sure to measure precisely," Tricia explained, tapping the chalk lines with her foot. "From here to here is about 3.5 feet, more than enough for someone with a walker or stroller." Larry nodded approvingly. "Looks good, Tricia. This is well thought out. I can't see any major obstruction." Karen pursed her lips. She stepped forward, measuring tape at the ready, stooping to verify distances. After a minute, she rose, shaking her head. "This is too tight. If two people come from opposite directions, or if there's a crowd around a table, we'll have congestion. The sidewalk might be effectively blocked. And what if the demonstration booth draws a crowd onto the grass, which could become muddy or slippery? Tricia tried to keep her tone calm. We have volunteers assigned to manage crowds, ensuring the walkway remains passable. Plus, the grass is fairly level. We can put down a mat if it's muddy. We're expecting nice weather anyway. Karen scribbled notes, frowning. No, I'm not satisfied. Meadowvale's bylaws are clear. No unsanctioned structures can impede safe passage. These folding tables, especially if placed side by side, could easily create a hazard. People might trip, or a wheelchair user might not have enough turning space. Larry interjected gently. Karen, I think you're overstating the risk. The parents have done a solid job ensuring at least 3 feet. That's more than most building codes require for wheelchair clearance. But Karen was unyielding. I disagree. We're not just dealing with a static 3 feet. The moment people start milling around, the walkway effectively shrinks. The HOA can't condone that. This is a lawsuit waiting to happen if someone is injured. I propose we relocate the entire event to the far end of the parking lot, near the open field. That would remove the risk of blocking the entrance and keep the sidewalk free. Tricia's face fell. The open field is uneven and far from the building's bathrooms. Also, many folks with mobility issues would find it hard to get there. And we want passersby to see us, so they'll stop and donate. Karen's tone hardened. Safety must come before convenience. Or aesthetics, she added pointedly. She turned to Larry. As the neighborhood standards liaison, I urge an immediate vote to disallow these tables on the walkway. The board can't ignore potential hazards. Larry sighed. He looked at the other board members, who seemed hesitant. None wanted a confrontation, but they also recognized that the event was crucial for charity. Let's not jump to extremes, he said. We'll convene a quick board discussion. Karen, do you mind stepping aside while we talk it through with Tricia? Karen clenched her jaw but complied. She retreated a few paces, arms folded. Over the next 10 minutes, Larry and the others quietly debated. Tricia showed them her volunteer schedule, explaining crowd management, even offering to set up small roped lanes to keep people from spilling into the walkway. She promised to have ramp watchers for wheelchair users, ensuring the walkway remained open. Finally, the board returned with a compromise. The event could proceed on the sidewalk, provided the tables were angled so at least 4 feet of clear space remained, and that volunteers actively guided foot traffic. They also required the wheelchair demonstration remain entirely on the grass, with a sturdy mat underneath if needed. We believe that's fair, Larry said. Tricia, can you do that? Tricia nodded, relief washing over her face. Absolutely. We'll do everything possible to keep it safe. Karen glared, noting the official decision with grudging acceptance. She scowled, refusing to drop her objections. But with the majority consensus against her, she had little choice. If anything goes wrong, she muttered, the HOA won't be liable. I'll make sure of that. She spun on her heel, heading off. A swirl of unease lingered among the group. Even though the board had upheld the sidewalk arrangement, Karen's hostility foreshadowed potential trouble. Would she truly let the fundraiser proceed in peace? At last, the weekend of the charity bake sale arrived. On Saturday morning, families bustled around the community center's walkway, setting up folding tables, laying bright plastic tablecloths, and arranging homemade treats in neat rows. Some brought cupcakes with colorful frosting, others displayed pies and brownies. Children taped up hand-drawn signs reading, "Help kids in need," and "Your donations make a difference." A small group installed a wide mat on the grass near the walkway, carefully anchoring it so wheelchairs or canes wouldn't sink into soft ground. On that mat, the local wheelchair supplier set up a demonstration area, a foldable ramp, a sample pediatric wheelchair, and informational brochures about therapy services. Tricia monitored everything like a conductor, ensuring each table angled slightly so that from the building's doors outward, a clear 4-foot corridor remained. Volunteers, wearing matching T-shirts, prepared to guide foot traffic. By 10 a.m., passers-by began trickling in. Families from within Meadowvale, plus a few from neighboring communities, strolled up to admire the baked goods. The atmosphere was festive. Parents chatted with each other, kids ran around, within reason, and the donation jar started filling up with bills and coins. The bright sunshine and mild breeze made for perfect conditions. People seemed genuinely touched by the fundraiser's mission, helping disabled children obtain necessary equipment. That cheerful ambience lasted about an hour, until a familiar figure appeared, Karen, striding down the sidewalk with a determined air. She wore a crisp blouse, held her phone in one hand, and seemed to be filming or snapping photos. Trisha and a few others exchanged uneasy glances. She had the look of someone on a mission. Within minutes, Karen marched to the center of the walkway, scanning for infractions. She quickly confronted a cluster of people chatting near the second table. "Excuse me," she said loudly. "You're blocking the walkway. We need to keep this space open for safe passage." The group politely parted. A volunteer approached to help direct them. But Karen refused to soften her tone. "This is exactly what I feared," she declared. "People are crowding around, leaving less than the mandated 4 feet." Trisha hurried over, trying to diffuse tension. "We're reminding folks to keep an aisle free. I promise we'll manage it. Please, Karen, is there something else we can help with?" Karen didn't respond. She resumed filming, capturing short video clips of the tables and the crowd. Then she spotted the wheelchair booth on the grass. She marched there next, pointing to a corner of the mat that had folded slightly. "This is a trip hazard," she proclaimed. "Somebody could catch a foot or wheel and topple." The board insisted this remain safe and secured. "It's obviously not." The wheelchair supplier's representative apologized, quickly smoothing out the mat. "We're sorry. The edge got kicked up. We'll fix it right away." The volunteer hammered an extra stake to hold it. But Karen just shook her head, exasperated. "I'm going to have to file a complaint with the HOA. This event is poorly managed." Trisha's cheeks burned. She tried to remain polite. "Karen, we appreciate your feedback, but these are minor issues we can fix on the spot. The board approved our layout. Everyone's being careful, and we have volunteers on crowd control." Scowling, Karen stepped aside, tapping on her phone, likely sending urgent texts or emails. Within half an hour, she escalated further. She called Larry McPherson and insisted he come down to witness the violations personally. "They're not maintaining safe clearance," she complained. "We need to shut this down." Reluctantly, Larry came over, found a few narrow spots, but overall a workable arrangement. He observed volunteers guiding traffic, and no one seemed upset except Karen. "We can ask them to shift the table a bit," Larry said, "but there's no cause to shut down everything." Karen glared. "This is unacceptable. Fine, do what you want. But if someone gets hurt, it's on your heads." She stomped away, leaving behind a wave of sighs and rolled eyes. Some parents and neighbors glanced at each other in disbelief. The kids, oblivious to the tension, continued cheerfully hawking cookies. By noon, the sales donation jars were already half full, proving that despite Karen's threats, the community support was unwavering. Unbeknownst to anyone, Karen wasn't giving up. She retreated home, scanning the HOA guidelines again, considering if she could call in a city code inspector or the fire marshal. Something to force them to move or shut down, she thought bitterly. She refused to let a crowd of disorganized do-gooders overshadow her authority as the neighborhood's rule enforcer. True to her plan, Karen spent her afternoon making phone calls. She contacted the local municipal office, leaving messages about a public safety concern at Meadowvale's community center. She tried the fire department next, insinuating that the event might block emergency egress. "I'm not certain they have the required permit for a crowd on that sidewalk," she alleged. She even phoned the local building inspector's line, hoping someone would show up in an official capacity to halt the event. Late in the afternoon, an unexpected visitor arrived, a town code enforcement officer, responding to a vague complaint about unsafe structures blocking a walkway. He wore a city badge and carried a clipboard. Karen, who had been lurking near her front window, sprang out to greet him. "Thank goodness you're here," she exclaimed, feigning relief. "We have a major sidewalk obstruction, a potential tripping hazard. It's a public thoroughfare, and they've just taken it over for a bake sale." The officer frowned. We got an anonymous complaint. Let's see what's going on. She guided him to the community center walkway, now quieter as the day's busiest period had passed, but still active enough. The tables remained in place, volunteers tidying up. A few stragglers sampled leftover treats. The officer approached calmly, scanning the setup. Trisha, noticing his city badge, stepped forward to greet him. "Hello, can I help you?" He introduced himself, explaining he was investigating a complaint. "We're told you've blocked the sidewalk, creating a hazard. I need to verify compliance with local codes." Trisha tried not to bristle at the seriousness of his tone. She showed him around, pointing out the 4-foot corridor left open, the roped lanes and the mat on the grass. The officer measured, took notes, and asked about the duration of the event. He also observed the parents reminding people to keep the path clear. After 15 minutes, the officer pulled Trisha aside. "I see no violation here," he said, shaking his head. "You've left sufficient clearance, more than the 3 feet typically required for walkways. The tables look stable, and you have volunteers managing traffic. From a code standpoint, this seems fine. I'll file a report saying no action needed." Trisha breathed a sigh of relief. Karen, watching from a short distance, gaped in disbelief. How could the city official not crack down? She marched over. "But what about the wheelchair demonstration? The mat could slip. And the crowds? Aren't they a hazard?" The officer shrugged. "Crowds on a sidewalk are common during events. As long as an open path is maintained, it's acceptable. The mat looks secure. I see no code reason to shut this down." With that, he offered a polite nod and departed. Karen stood, speechless, anger rising. Trisha and a few volunteers exchanged triumphant looks. They returned to their tasks, ignoring Karen's glare. As dusk approached, the first day of the bake sale wrapped up successfully. Families packed away leftover pastries, counting the donations, an impressive sum that far exceeded their initial daily goal. The wheelchair rep left smiling, grateful for the awareness raised. Despite Karen's repeated sabotage attempts, day 1 ended on a high note. That evening, the neighborhood social media pages buzzed with praise for the event. Photos circulated of kids behind tables, beaming over trays of cookies. Many posted about how the demonstration taught them about the cost and complexity of wheelchairs. Meanwhile, Karen scrolled through these posts with frustration, seeing how her calls had failed to stop anything. She felt an even stronger urge to prevent day 2 from proceeding. But how? Little did she know that her next move, ironically, would ignite the parents' creativity, leading them to devise an ingenious solution that eliminated all plausible grounds for her tripping hazard argument, transforming the second day of the bake sale into an even bigger triumph. The second day of the bake sale dawned bright again. By 9 a.m., the parents were back, reassembling their tables, restocking pastries, and adjusting their layout for maximum convenience. They felt confident after the code enforcement officer's approval, but a subtle tension lingered. Karen was still out there, itching to disrupt. They soon learned she wasn't done. At around 9:30 a.m., just as families began arriving, Karen marched up once more, brandishing a stack of printed pages. "I have fresh concerns," she announced, her voice ringing with self-assured authority. She thrust the papers at Trisha. "Here are relevant excerpts from Meadowvale's bylaws about walkway obstructions. They specifically forbid any structure that might cause a tripping hazard, including temporary stands or stalls, if they're on a pedestrian route. The code inspector may have missed these nuances, but the HOA rules are separate and must be respected." Trisha scanned the highlighted text. Indeed, it mentioned that no permanent or semi-permanent fixture shall be placed in a manner that obstructs foot traffic on shared walkways. The language was broad, typically used to limit large planters or decorations. Trisha pointed out the phrase semi-permanent, emphasizing that a few folding tables for a weekend fundraiser were hardly semi-permanent. But Karen insisted they create the same risk. "If I bring this to the board's legal counsel, you'll see. We can't have these tables if they pose any risk at all." Exasperated, Trisha tried reason. "Karen, they're not semi-permanent. They're literally fold-up tables. We pack them up at day's end. We have volunteers to handle crowd flow. The city official cleared us. The board gave provisional approval. What more can we do? Karen stiffened. You can move them out of the walkway or cancel the event. Or I'll file an official complaint with the board, pushing for immediate removal. If the board fails to act, I'll call for an emergency HOA meeting. This isn't up for debate. You are violating the letter of the bylaw. She paused, glaring. If you continue, expect formal enforcement, fines, potential revocation of your permit. With that ultimatum, Karen stormed off, leaving Tricia and the other parents shaken. They recognized that if Karen dragged them into an HOA legal dispute, the event's second day might be overshadowed or forcibly canceled. We can't let her do that, one father said. But if we keep the tables here, she'll keep stirring trouble. She's got the bylaws in her favor, twisted as it is. Tricia felt a knot in her stomach. The last thing they wanted was a messy fight that tarnished the charitable mission. She quickly summoned the core volunteers, brainstorming ways to satisfy Karen's no walkway obstruction argument. What if we reduce the table size? What if we shift them fully onto the grass? But then the wheelchair demonstration wouldn't be easy to see. Each suggestion ran into practical snags: lack of stable ground, concerns about accessibility, or the crowd stepping onto the walkway anyway. Then, a father named Reggie Wallace, an architect by trade, had a spark of genius. What if we keep the tables in front of the building, but modify them so they don't rest on the walkway? We can build small platforms or ramps behind each table, letting us push the entire stall up onto the grass, away from the main path. People can approach from a ramp or from the side, while the walkway remains completely clear. The group lit up at the idea. Reggie outlined a quick plan. Using leftover plywood and some sturdy planks, they could rig short ramps that elevated each table's back legs, tilting them slightly forward so passers-by could see the baked goods from the walkway but not have to step onto it. Volunteers could stand behind the table on the raised platform, ensuring the walkway was fully open. It's like a miniature stage, Reggie grinned, and the ramp ensures it's accessible if a wheelchair user wants to come up closer. The biggest hurdle was time, constructing these platforms in mere hours. But with the community's momentum, half a dozen parents hopped into action, rummaging for supplies in their garages. Within an hour, a mini construction zone popped up near the center's parking lot. They hammered planks together to form short ramps and stable surfaces, each measured to ensure a gentle slope. Another volunteer rummaged for leftover carpet strips to prevent slipping. A father who was a part-time carpenter brought nails, a power drill, and a level. Despite the rush, a sense of excitement coursed through them. They were about to solve Karen's obstruction complaint with an ingenious, wheelchair-friendly design. Meanwhile, Tricia kept the bake sale going, telling curious customers, "We're just upgrading our stands. Please bear with us." By noon, the newly built ramp-equipped platforms were ready. Parents carefully slid each folding table onto a platform positioned on the grass behind the sidewalk. The front edge of the table angled slightly over the walkway, allowing easy viewing of the pastries, but the table legs themselves were off the walkway. Volunteers then tested the ramps, verifying they could support wheelchairs or strollers. The walkway itself was now completely unobstructed, a full 4 to 5 feet of open space. Stepping back, the PTO parents beamed at their handiwork. "Karen can't complain about blocking the path now," Reggie said proudly. "And it's more inclusive. A wheelchair user can roll right up the ramp, level with the table." Tricia nearly jumped with excitement. This might actually draw more folks, like a creative mini exhibit. By early afternoon, the newly designed ramp-friendly stalls were fully operational. Each station had a short wooden platform behind the sidewalk, a gentle slope leading up from the grass. The folding tables sat on the platform, angled so that baked goods were clearly visible from the walkway. Rope lanes on either side guided foot traffic. Now, absolutely no portion of the table or volunteers encroached on the sidewalk. There was enough room for 2 or 3 people to pass each other comfortably. Curious neighbors who'd visited the previous day returned, noticing the big changes. "Wow, this is fancy," one said, eyeing the ramp. A wheelchair-bound mother from a nearby neighborhood tried rolling up to the table. With a little guidance from a volunteer, She found it surprisingly easy to ascend the short slope and come face to face with the cookie trays. She grinned widely. This is actually more convenient than standing in the walkway, especially if I want to chat with you about the ingredients. Word spread that the sale had improved accessibility. The event now featured an innovative design that served everyone's needs while eliminating sidewalk clutter. More families and curious onlookers arrived, praising the proactive solution. Some folks who had felt uneasy about potential crowding the day before saw how open the walkway was and decided to stay longer, browsing the stalls in a relaxed manner. The environment felt more open and purposeful. Around 2 p.m., with the fundraiser in full swing, Karen reappeared. She walked up, fully expecting to find tables still on the walkway. Instead, she saw the row of ramped platforms nestled neatly on the grass, each table angled over the sidewalk but not occupying it. The result was, ironically, quite aesthetically pleasing. It resembled a small pop-up market with many stages. A few volunteers spotted Karen, exchanging glances of anticipation. Karen blinked, momentarily at a loss for words. She stepped up to the walkway, scanning for any potential violation. The table legs were off the pavement, the walkway was wide open, no crowd obstructed it. People strolled freely. "What is this?" she muttered, walking closer. Reggie approached, smiling. "We took your concerns seriously and built these ramp-friendly stalls. Now the walkway's totally clear, and we ensure safe wheelchair access. Win-win, right?" Karen's expression tightened. "Ew. Improvised a construction project without official HOA approval?" Reggie shrugged. "We used portable materials, no permanent changes. It's no different than a folding table, except we have a ramp behind it. We're not attached to the ground. If the board or the code officer wants to check, that's fine." Karen scowled, stepping onto a platform. It was sturdy. She tried wiggling it, but it barely moved. The volunteer behind the table politely asked if she'd like to buy a muffin. Karen ignored the offer, stepping back, searching for any angle to criticize. The ramps had small safety rails. The edges were taped with bright neon strips to prevent tripping, and each platform left the walkway completely open. She found nothing obvious to condemn. Grinding her teeth, Karen turned away, pulling out her phone again, perhaps considering a second code call. But she realized that if the city officer or the HOA board came now, they'd likely be impressed by the improvements, not alarmed. Indeed, the arrangement was arguably even safer than the original plan. People walking by could see the baked goods from the sidewalk without crowding, and those wanting a closer look used the ramp. There was no glaring violation left for her to exploit. Though furious, Karen realized she was stuck. She stormed off, leaving the parents grinning triumphantly behind her. The event carried on, bigger crowds forming now that there was zero concern about obstructed walkways. Children loved walking up the ramps. Older folks appreciated the reduced congestion. Even the wheelchair demonstration booth saw a surge of visitors intrigued by the new design. By 4 p.m., the donation jars overflowed, forcing volunteers to fetch extra boxes for cash contributions. The final hours of day, too, felt celebratory. Neighbors praised the parents' resourcefulness in tackling compliance concerns. They recognized that Karen's attempt to shut the sale down had inadvertently spurred a more inventive, accessible setup. As the sun began to set, the bake sale concluded with a sense of euphoria. The total donations far exceeded the initial target, ensuring more funds for wheelchairs and therapy sessions. Everyone pitched in to dismantle the ramp platforms, finding them easy to fold and stack for future use. A few joked, "Karen's strong-arm approach gave us the best bake sale setup ever." Others, more serious, marveled at how adversity had brought out the neighborhood's creative spirit. Either way, the consensus was clear. The event had triumphed, outshining its initial concept. And it was far from over. The next day, the parents planned to announce the final donation sum, reveal expansions to the wheelchair fundraiser, and celebrate how Meadowvale had rallied to help kids in need. The following morning, a wave of social media posts and text messages spread the news. The charity bake sale had raised an astonishing amount. Tricia tallied up the final figures, blinking back tears of joy. The total more than doubled the PTO's original goal, ensuring that multiple children could receive specialized wheelchairs, plus therapy grants for the year. Proud parents shared the achievement widely, tagging each other in heartfelt thanks. Local coverage followed. A community blog wrote, "Meadowvale's bake sale reaches new heights. Ingenious ramp stalls defy naysayers." A small online paper interviewed Reggie Wallace about how he designed the foldable ramps overnight. They praised the inclusive, accessible approach. Even a representative from the wheelchair nonprofit posted a glowing endorsement. Rarely do we see neighborhoods so committed to practical solutions for universal access. Bravo, Meadowvale Court. Amid the celebration, Karen went noticeably silent. Neighbors who usually saw her walking the block early in the morning noticed she stayed indoors for a couple of days, blinds drawn. Some suspected she was licking her wounds. Others guessed she might be writing an official complaint to the HOA. But no new forms arrived, and no additional calls to the city or the fire department were reported. It seemed Karen had run out of angles to fight a design that had proven safe, crowd-friendly, and popular. At the next HOA meeting, just a few nights later, Tricia and the parents presented a short slideshow of the bake sale. Photos showed the ramped platforms, the smiling children, the lines of neighbors sampling cupcakes. The board members applauded, impressed that the potential conflict had been turned into an example of positive innovation. Larry McPherson even joked, "We might consider these ramp stalls for future community events. If the PTO's all right with sharing your design?" The only board member not openly clapping was Karen. She sat stiffly, eyes on her lap. When the time came for any new business or complaints, she cleared her throat, briefly referencing concerns about ephemeral structures, but quickly realized the mood in the room offered her no support. She dropped the matter, mumbling a vague comment about future guidelines. The meeting ended with a sense of contentment, overshadowing her protests entirely. Outside the meeting, parents happily discussed the next steps, perhaps hosting more inclusive events, using the platform concept for rummage sales or holiday bazaars, always mindful of providing adequate wheelchair or walker access. Their success had opened their eyes to the broader principle of universal design. Everyone benefited when spaces were made more navigable. Karen retreated that evening to her home, frustration burning. She had lost face publicly. The entire neighborhood praised the very stalls she had wanted to ban. Even her best friend on the board, a mild ally, avoided taking her side. She recognized that continuing her crusade would only make her appear petty and risk a formal rebuke from the board. Thus, she found herself forced to concede, albeit silently. In the days that followed, life in Meadowvale Court returned to its usual calm. The newly constructed ramps were stacked neatly in Tricia's garage, waiting for the next event. People who had parted with $20 for a plate of brownies felt satisfied that their money was going to a worthy cause. And the children whose therapies the fundraiser would support, though they lived outside the immediate neighborhood, became the real winners, receiving phone calls from the PTO with the good news that new wheelchairs and therapy sessions were funded. For a brief moment, it seemed the entire fiasco had ended with minimal drama. But for the parents, there was one more highlight to come: a weekend block party celebrating the fundraiser success and awarding a symbolic thank you to those who had helped design the ramps. It was a chance for everyone, except possibly Karen, to revel in the sense of community spirit that overshadowed any negativity. A week after the bake sale, a Saturday afternoon block party brought Meadowvale Court alive. Grill smoke wafted over fences, kids zoomed by on bicycles, and neighbors lugged lawn chairs to the cul-de-sac near the community center. A small stage had been set up with a microphone and speakers to announce updates and amuse the kids with karaoke. Bright banners reading "Congratulations, Meadowvale" fluttered in the light breeze. At the party's midpoint, Tricia Donovan took the microphone. She recounted the bake sale successes, praising all who contributed. "We raised over $8,000, she announced, her voice trembling with pride. Applause thundered. That money goes directly to helping kids who need specialized wheelchairs and therapy. We change lives, folks. No exaggeration. People whistled and cheered. She turned next to Reggie Wallace, inviting him on stage, and to the dad who single-handedly spearheaded the ramp design. "Reggie, come on up." The crowd broke into even louder cheers as Reggie stepped forward, bashfully accepting a small plaque that read, "Creative Problem Solver Award." He grinned wide, waving at his family. "I just did what needed to be done," he said into the mic. "But I wouldn't have had the chance if we hadn't faced a challenge in the first place." This is proof that sometimes adversity leads to better solutions. The crowd roared in agreement. In the back, Karen stood quietly. She'd come to the block party out of a sense of obligation, but she remained a distant figure. Hearing Reggie's words, she felt a pang. "He's basically referencing me as the adversity." She frowned, remembering how her repeated attempts to kill the event had ignited the parents' creativity instead. She watched as neighbors patted Reggie on the back, praising his ramp idea. She realized the entire fiasco had ended not in condemnation of the parents, but in condemnation of her approach. Though no one openly scolded her, the community's stance was clear. The event was worth protecting, and negativity had no place in overshadowing a good cause. After Reggie's speech, the microphone passed to various kids who performed songs or recited jokes. The atmosphere was joyous, free of tension. People carried plates of potluck dishes, chatted with neighbors they barely saw before. Meanwhile, Karen lingered near the dessert table, uncertain whether to slip away or endure the socializing. She overheard praises for the new folding ramp stalls, folks discussing how they'd like to use them for future events, maybe a summer lemonade stand or holiday craft fair. Each mention felt like a small sting, reminding her that her enforcement attempts had backfired. Yet, a subtle transformation flickered in her mind. While she still disliked the clutter of events, she saw how strongly the neighborhood bonded when rallying around cause. She recognized, on some level, that her pursuit of strict compliance had clashed with a far more important principle: communal generosity and inclusion. She'd lost that battle, and in losing, perhaps gleaned a lesson about the real values people cherished here. By sundown, the block party wound down. Neighbors gathered up chairs, hugging goodbye. Tricia took the mic one last time, announcing the final total for the fundraiser, including late donations, nearly $8,500. A final round of applause echoed through the cul-de-sac. Families parted ways, many still wearing broad smiles. That night, social media lit up with photos from the party, culminating in a new wave of positivity around Meadowvale. "Our neighborhood truly is like family," one post read, garnering dozens of likes. Another praised the children's dedication to helping kids with disabilities. The greatest delight came from the knowledge that adversity, Karen's repeated blockages, had ironically strengthened the event's design, leading to record donations and a visually ingenious display that no one would soon forget. Days later, the wheelchair nonprofit confirmed that 3 children from the local region would each receive a new adaptive wheelchair. The families wrote heartfelt letters of thanks. Some of these letters were pinned to the community center's bulletin board for all to see, including Karen. While the entire fiasco had been triggered by her negativity, the unstoppable wave of goodwill had overshadowed that initial conflict. In the end, Meadowvale Court emerged more unified, with a new tradition of using ramp-friendly stalls for big events, ensuring zero walkway disputes and maximum inclusivity. Parents joked about making T-shirts that read, "We survived Karen's tripping hazard," though they never actually printed them. Instead, they carried forward a sense of compassion, creativity, and neighborly spirit that no amount of petty enforcement could quench. That was the happy ending. A bake sale for charity, threatened by a meddlesome neighbor, had evolved into a symbol of the neighborhood's resilience. The final donation total soared, new solutions for accessibility blossomed, and even the concept of sidewalk clutter gave way to an innovative design that served everyone. Karen's attempts to sabotage the event ironically led to a more triumphant, record-breaking success, proving once again that generosity and empathy can rise above the harshest critics, and in doing so, bring a community closer together than ever.